When a transplant flight crashed in the Midlands, who was there to save the day?
The smoke inside the aircraft was just zero visibility. The engine was still running. It was just the worst case scenario.
First tonight, the heroic actions of firefighters when an emergency flight crashed at Birmingham Airport. Inside the burning wreck of the private jet were 2 pilots and a donor organ, a liver desperately needed for a vital transplant operation. What unfolded on that cold November afternoon was a story of immense bravery. Friday the 19th of November should have been a routine day at Birmingham Airport. As it turned out, it was anything but.
Tonight, a light aircraft carrying organs for transplant has crashed
at Birmingham
in thick
Airport
fog
have been
at
suspended tonight and the runway closed after an
That afternoon, a life-saving flight to deliver a transplant organ crashed and burst into flames. The lives of 3 people were left hanging in the balance. Now, for the first time, the men on the ground that day tell inside out their story. 3 p.m. and a private jet, call name Echo Mike, sets off from Belfast on a mercy mission. Its cargo, a vital liver for a patient at Birmingham's Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
Air transplant is very important to us to transport organs from places like Northern Ireland or from the north of Scotland to London. And if we didn't have that facility, then patients would lose out on receiving an organ and might die as a consequence.
For this patient classed super urgent, the liver was their last chance.
Well, all patients on the liver transplant waiting list are very sick, but we do have this category called the super urgent category for those whose chances of survival are a matter of just a few days, 2 or 3 days in this sort of instance. And it's absolutely vital, therefore, that we get an organ for them as quickly as possible.
With under an hour until the liver was due to arrive, preparations for the life-saving operation began. Just a few miles away at Birmingham Airport, it was business as usual for boss Paul Keogh.
Well, organ donor flights happen from time to time all over the UK. We never know about it because the procedure is normally very slick. The airplane lands, the ambulance arrives, and the organ is taken away. On this occasion, it turned out to be something different.
A sudden change in the weather was about to alter the course of the afternoon's events.
It was a normal Friday, blue sky day, but the fog was rolling in and we implemented these special low visibility procedures. There's a set of rules that we have to implement to increase the safety margins at the airfield because you just can't see the aeroplanes.
At 3:30, Dennis Goff was playing golf on the course next to the airport. A few hundred yards away, he saw the donor flight emerge from the fog.
It was coming towards us perilously close to the perimeter fence, I'd say, and it was making a horrible squealing and scraping noise as it ran alongside the grass, and it kept going at the same speed, which was probably several hundred miles an hour, till it got level with us, and that's when it exploded into a giant fireball.
As it approached the runway, Echo Mike hit an airport mast. Seconds later, the plane crash-landed and burst into flames.
Well, we have an alert system called Mission Mode, and it sent a text message to my mobile phone, which I picked up, looked at, saw aircraft accident on the phone. Well, your mind is racing. Is it an exercise? Is there something I've missed on the text? Is there something I've not seen? Perhaps it's off the airfield. Is it a passenger aeroplane? What is it?
But boss Paul Keogh wasn't the first to know. That call came to the men here at Redwatch, the airport's rapid response fire service, and their actions were about to prevent a crash turning into a catastrophe.
The alarm sounded, which was the crash alarm, and the first thing I thought was the watch manager set up an exercise on a foggy day, and I was just thinking, what's going on? but obviously that turned out not to be the case. So you know you've got to do your job, and there's a set routine really that you go into, a set mode. You make sure everything's right, your kit, the radios are on, that you're listening out, the vehicles are ready to go, and just that you're ready to do what we're supposed to do. We did actually see what turned out to be the first officer who'd already self-evacuated from the aircraft. And one of the lads started running a hose out and firefighting, and I ran to the first officer to ask him if there was anybody else inside, and he told me that there was a donor, and I sort of questioned, what do you mean, a donor? And he said, it's a donor box, and I said, right, is there anybody else inside? And he said, yes, the pilot. So straight away then, the focus becomes, obviously rescuing the pilot and then making sure that we can get him out alive. I felt him move, so I knew he was alive. He didn't say anything. I shouted to him that obviously the fire service will try and get him out, but he did manage to free himself and managed to get between the two seats, and then we could pull him out of the door. He then saw the box, which I assumed was the donor box, inside the door, and just pulled it out and took it to a safe place.
The trapped pilot was safe, but suffering severe pelvic injuries, he wasn't out of danger yet. An air ambulance had been scrambled. Now it was down to the crew to keep him stable and get him to hospital as quickly as possible.
Pelvic injuries can be extremely serious, indeed fatal, through the high volume of blood that you can lose from a fractured pelvis. So we always work on the worst case scenario, and if there's any indication of a pelvic injury, then we'll apply a pelvic splint. It's very important to get the patient to hospital quickly, because there are quite a lot of other problems that we can't manage at the scene of the accident, such as bleeding. So it's important they're taken to hospital very quickly, and then they can be thoroughly assessed, and if necessary go straight to the operating theatre and have any sources of bleeding controlled.
With the crew on their way to safety, attention now turned to the plane's life-saving cargo. The life of a desperately ill transplant patient still hung in the balance. The donor liver was on its way, but snatched from the heat of a burning plane, the big question was, what condition was the organ in?
The box was covered in burnt aviation fuel and a large amount of foam that the fire service had used to put the fire out. But once we'd opened the box, the liver was sitting nestled in the ice, so I felt that on inspection that the liver was probably going to be usable.
The critical moment is when the clamps come off and the liver is reperfused with blood. If I can give you an analogy, having a liver transplant is rather like changing the engine in your car. So supposing you've got a battered old Ford Escort that's just about chugging up the hill to get you home, and you've got a friend with a newer model that he wraps around a lamppost and bends the chassis, and it's written off. So you look into the engine compartment and say, the engine appears undamaged, I'll change for his newer engine for my old banger. The problem is that it's not until you turn the ignition key that you know whether the engine is going to start or not, and the same with us with the liver transplant. It's not until we reperfuse it with blood that we know whether it's going to work or not.
After 4 hours, the operation ended in success. To everyone's relief, the liver worked, and although there are no guarantees for the future, the patient remains stable.
It is a dinner topic of conversation, so you have dinner and people ask about it, and you must have had a difficult day. I didn't. I'm very lucky. I was in the control centre in a dry one place. There were people out there doing a proper job at the time, and I'm very proud they did that so well.
Until the investigation is complete, no one knows for sure what caused Flight Echo Mike to crash. But the firefighters of Redwatch undoubtedly helped save 3 lives.
Luckily for us, everything came out well. Both the guys came off alive, and the liver and the transplant is just an added bonus. And we look at it and we're proud as a watch. It was something that we're trained to do. We don't very often get a chance to do it, thankfully, but it's something that we do train to do it. And I think everybody on the watch is proud of the job that we did.